It's 6 o'clock, and we'll start the meeting. So- um, we have everyone here except for Michael Payne, so all except for Michael is present and accounted for. This is our last work session for the budget, and so we are going to get down into some more weeds. Is this also a public hearing at the end? You know, if public comes, it's okay. So if public is happen to be here when we're done with the presentation and discussion, we certainly would take public input. So with that, I'll turn it over to you or Chrissy. Or you.
So good evening, Mayor, councilors, members of the public who are tuning in. We are welcoming you to your last of the scheduled work sessions, although there are still a couple of steps and a special meeting that needs to be had. We'll talk about that as well. I want to remind you all to this evening, please lean forward and speak into your microphones or just pull them closer because we do have an event at Ting that will be competing with you for those to be able to hear you. This last session is really the wrap-up. The goal for us, of course, is to make sure that we are now all on the same page as we conclude the great experience of putting together a local government budget, making sure that we are ready to move forward into our new fiscal year that starts July 1st. We have a couple things to go over. Ms. Hamlin's going to do her thing of walking you through a couple of things that we have in some course corrections and some identification of additional funds and pointing out some recommended uses, and have you all confirm, and then go over for you the dates for the remaining steps as we work to complete the recasting your consideration of property taxes. Just want to make sure that we get those steps right for the public to be able to follow along and to participate as they may be interested. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hamill and we'll get this done.
Good evening. So our revenue team has continued to meet during this time that we've been holding work sessions. We did have a couple of revisions on a few of the revenues. Personal property tax, we revised that up. There's about an $84,000 change there. Vehicle daily rental, a big $5,000 change there. Plastic bag tax, as we have continued to look at the trends for collections this year, we are revising that down about $15,000, which is, if you will recall, when we talked about that tax, that is hopefully, if the tax is doing its job, that will continue to decrease. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then business and professional license, BPOL. Those assessments were due March 1st, well, after the first projections, and so we did see a $700,000 increase there. So all of those combined, we do have supplemental revenue over and above the proposed budget of $774,263.
Yay.
Right?
So what's going on with the B-poll taxes that causes them to be 7% higher?
He was wondering if he had to come up.
Just tap it more.
This.
It's not working?
Okay, this is Todd Divers, Commissioner of the Revenue. You know, I don't know that anything in particular is going on. The nature of BPOL is that it rolls in at one time. It's due on March 1st, so that money comes in over the course of March and April. So we don't really have a very good idea, a basis to estimate it until the very end. I think, you know, coming out of COVID still, you know, we're still a little bit gun shy about predicting gross receipts and things like that. You know, it's just
Is it higher than the same amount this fiscal year? Well, just because it was proposed for next fiscal year doesn't tell me, because
What's proposed for next fiscal year is gonna be in line with what we're gonna end up with this fiscal year, yeah. Which we revised at the same time that we changed this.
What I'm looking at, just looking at the two lines, where it says proposed 10,100,000, was that basically what you would have been projecting for this fiscal year?
I think it was maybe a little bit more than what we were projecting for this fiscal year. When did we give you that number, that 10?
10.8,
No, 10.1.
10.1, I think it's flat with 20.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's
Okay,
flat.
So this, the fact that you're suggesting we put 10.8 must mean, number one, that we're expecting to end this current fiscal year in the plus column on that,
Correct.
and that we anticipate that trend will continue at least, if not necessarily accelerate.
We think so, yes.
Okay.
We hope so. Although, this was before recent developments in
Sure, I
DC.
understand. And I was just curious, I mean, to have a change of 7% in a number that is that large is kind of an interesting point.
It's a very difficult tax to hit. We have some large taxpayers that swing by hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Huh,
And they can make or break it.
okay,
And so we just
cool.
have to wait to see what happens. And there's no way to tell ahead, there's no way to prognosticate
Yeah.
how they're going to do.
Okay,
Remind me what goes into BPOL.
That's a business license for,
law firms,
yeah, just about anything. Anybody who's conducting any sort of enterprise in the city is going to be subject to business license.
So it's the license tax?
It is a license tax. I
So
mean,
that total number is license taxes?
correct.
Wow.
Well, I mean, that's not like your NDS
Right.
building permits and things like that. It's just business license.
Right.
I always hate to describe it as it's a privilege tax. It's for technically, I guess the code says it's for the privilege of conducting business in Charlottesville. But it's really a tax, it's a tax receipt. The piece of paper is just a tax receipt.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
thank you.
Sure.
I was gonna bring up the quarterly report, but we actually didn't show it in the quarterly report, so we were projecting it flat.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the revenue adjustments, so essentially, adding $774,000 to the budget. So before we talk about what to do with that, we wanted to go back one last time, because, we've spent a lot of time talking about your council's, discretionary funds. And there's been one revision there that we wanted to just talk through. Do you want?
Yeah. So, you all will remember that I pulled together a series of funds, including a series of funding resources to create a larger fund for you to disperse this proposed budget year, including your Strategic Initiatives Fund. It started with recommending increasing your Strategic Initiatives Fund to $500,000 so that you would have that in reserve for the full benefit of the calendar year to make certain decisions as things come forward. Kind of thinking that with all the volatility that we have in DC, there could very easily be a series of moments that come up, and that this would give you the flexibility to make some decisions in how we could support gaps in what could happen based on decisions and how it actually lands in the community. In addition to that, we realized the reduction in what the cost of the ACRJ project was going to be. We had some funds available in our Housing Opportunity Program support and the CAF. I pulled all of that together along with some available unspent CIP funds and a balance out of the CDBG account. I have since learned that I should leave CDBG alone and let our analyst work on that by himself, because it is a little bit more complicated. So I have found myself needing to withdraw those funds, which reduces the $1,002,001 that I had accumulated for you to $915,620. And the reason is CDBG is very prescribed. It has limitations on how you can spend in these different categories. What we had on the list, I thought would qualify, but once we got through all of your variations and considering what options you wanted to fund, which is this list here, the PHA and BRAC items don't actually fit because they are considered public service, and we always exceed our public service allocation, so those funds would not have been able to be spent in that category, and nothing else on your list would fit into that category. So that was the reason for us now coming back to you and saying that we're revising that discretionary fund down, but because we have realized additional revenue, we have a plan that we're showing you on how to recover that and some other things.
So, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time tracking here. So I get the 915 is from the prior slide.
These are all your decisions that we walked you through before.
So that takes
From
you
the
to 660.
is what you spent, which is what is the accumulation of all the line items above that.
And then 225, that's the difference between 915 and 620?
Right, and that's what we're showing you as the cash that would still be in your council strategic initiatives
And then
fund.
additional funds added, where does that come at, 185?
That's coming out of the
Oh.
774. So
That's
we'll
what
just-
you added.
That's
I
what we're
mean,
adding back,
you-
right, from the 774 that you just saw on the first slide.
And how did you arrive at that number?
Where I'll show you.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the part of the process where Chrissy gets to play, so what do you want to do?
Yeah, so, here is a spreadsheet. I also gave you a copy because it's a little bit hard on the screen, but, this first column is the $774,000 of new revenue that we just showed you. Your council strategic initiatives fund, right now, there's $364,000 in there. We're gonna show you how we're adding this 185. These other columns are also the other funding sources that got you to that 915, so the CAF, the HOPS, the CIP contingency, sorry. The CIP amendments. So the idea of this spreadsheet is to kind of show you what we've done here. So as you recall, the first proposed budget, we had $140,000 in your council's strategic initiatives account. That plus the 364 was going to get you to $500,000. Then through a series of meetings, you made some allocations to different agencies, which was on that slide we just showed you. So the Boys and Girls Club down through the PHA, all of these numbers here were on that list. That's how you spent the 140. And then some of that was the jail got reduced, the Blue Ridge Detention Center went up, we had to change bridge line. We also added funding for CRHA. And then anything that's highlighted in green tonight's the first time you're seeing that. So we're actually requesting a change for Home to Hope to provide some additional, an increase in direct aid. The Treasurer's Office has some annual maintenance fees for their online tax business portal. The SPCA budget, based on the new contract, is reducing by $68,000. The African American Heritage Center was not in the first version of the budget. That has been added back in. And then based on our tax assessments, relief assessments that were just being finished by the Commissioner's Office, we know that there's a need to increase the budget for that by about $250,000.
Can you please help me understand with the African American Heritage Center? Is this thing, I've been on council for, let me slow down. this is a recurring thing that comes up, it seems like every year. Is this the same item or something different?
Right, so the prior year, you all, through your conversations, we concluded that the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center was to be designated fundamental because we had continually came up with the rent consideration. So the mistake that happened, and I'm owning the mistake that happened, is that we missed
Okay.
the Jefferson School being on the fundamental list. And that was just an oversight on conversations with them on submitting through Zoom grants. So by not submitting through Zoom grants, they didn't appear on the list, but they didn't know that they had to still submit through Zoom grants. So we have some course corrections that we need to do there in making sure that everyone understands what they have to do still, even though they're in a non-competitive round. So this is just recognizing that error and putting it here. Thankfully, we have this realization of additional funds to make it that much smoother to be able to accomplish. And of course, that same thing applied, as we told you, as it related to CRHA, and adding because we're not going to label it resident services. It's just CRHA, because what we're going to say to them is it's the same situation of council has made the decision that annually you will not compete for funding by our designating this amount of money to you. If you are in search or pursuit of additional funds, then through that submission is where you make your request, so that we then can highlight that for consideration separate. Because part of what was part of the evaluation that I have to make, because Christy comes to me and says, are we going to give fundamental agencies an increase as they requested or not? That's the actual decision point. So that'll be a part of the ongoing consideration, that if the Jefferson School and if CRHA or anyone else, SPCA is a contract, but any of the other fundamentals, if they need additional funds, they would request it as a part of the fundamental submission. They will be reviewed by the budget office and our grants team, and then I will make a determination on how it becomes a recommendation for increase or not.
So is there any other money going to CRHA out of the general fund?
Not unless they're in one of the competitive rounds, CAF, or I can't remember if they're on the CAF list.
I mean, when you talk about an amount that is sort of what they get as a fundamental agency, is that this 137, or
Yeah.
is there some other number that they were already having gotten written in?
No, they would have this year, because of this error, because we missed it, and that's part of what we're course correcting by adding them back in this fundamental category based on your prior decisions. We have to have conversation with them about their pursuits of funding going forward. 'Cause to your point, they could be here and in the competitive rounds. I don't particularly care for that. I think that makes it double dipping in a way. I would rather them come through one lane, make your ask however you make your ask, and let us consider that in that moment, and then leave the competitive rounds open for those that don't have the avenue for the non-competitive space. And then we won't necessarily reduce who's in the competitive round, but we just eliminate the further consideration of a party that you've already decided that you wanted to support.
So if I've often wondered what exactly the financial arrangement either is or ought to be between the city and CRHA. Where CRHA, where we bought for them, I don't know, $5 million or at least of assets that they are supposed to be turning into more income, more revenue for them to help cover other shortfalls and so on and so forth. And I guess I'm just wondering, is this leading us to a position where we either want to be or should be exercising more fiscal oversight of their operation?
Well, I think that's a consideration that you all have to make. What I would say to you is this is what's leading us to more of the program relationship, the distinction of the relationship, because we're doing a number of different things with CRHA today. And I think part of what we need to do is get our arms around that, which Deputy Freeze is working with the Community Solutions staff right now in what I would generously call an audit. And that is just going through all of the different things that we are doing today, working with them, making sure that we're all on the same page. It's not viewed as a negative moment. It's about just getting our ducks in a row. and making sure that we're clear on the expectation on this is for you to do this by this date. The need and desire expectation for you to do this is on this date. We're working through all of that because honestly, that's never happened.
Right.
And I think what we're going to find ourselves at, from what my appreciation and my conversations with Mr. Sales has been, is he would very much like council to consider that 137 being dramatically more than that. And then he would not come through competitive rounds at all. And it would just be for a packaging of the things that the city identifies as supporting CRHA because of who they are and what they do for the population that they serve in our community. I think Councilor Payne has spoken to that in the past as well. So that may be where we go to over time, but I think we have all these other relationships that we need to work out, like the managing of the portfolio and what becomes of the revenues from that portfolio, and how do you then decide whether or not you should come in the competitive rounds? I think we're working towards trying to figure that out.
And I think, I think that'll be a very important topic going forward. And I think there's a planned kind of work session between City Council and CRHA in several months. And I know that CRHA, I think I could speak for them in saying they would, as many as those as council would find useful, they're open to doing if counselors have a lot of questions. Just quickly, I think they did not apply, or they did apply through HOPS and CAF. I could be wrong, but I don't think they received funding. So this would be the only one this year. And this isn't any request they're making, but they recently adopted their budget. And something that should be on our radars, whether we do or don't do anything, is CRHA's properties with the Dogwood portfolio and the ones they're attaching vouchers to are turning a decent profit, but they are losing a significant amount on each public housing unit. And the federal government has already removed, I think, around $1.3 million in funding for CRHA. And they're partially making that up with some of that revenue from attaching vouchers to units. But we should anticipate that over the next several years, their funding will probably be reduced by the federal government on the level of several $1 million. So that's definitely something we should be aware of and talking with them about. Again, whether we do or don't do anything, it's going to be an issue that we have to face.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in to say that, we should have a work session because I want to know how what's happening in Washington will impact, because, I haven't heard about here, but just in general that some of those funds for projects like that just over the United States have been, really competitive or drying up. So I'd like to know if we're still going to be on the same time. And so a couple of things. One was something that just came up at a United Way meeting that Ashley and I were with. And Ashley, was it the Prosper? Can you come up and maybe give a little background on that program? Because I thought it was.
Sure, I'm happy to. Good evening, City Council, City Manager. In full disclosure, I am on the United Way Board. It's the only local board that I do serve on because of how we fund them, and I do not vote in any funding that they receive from the city. However, they are engaged in a program that I think is pretty important for not only our community, but communities, honestly, across the nation. Many of you all may have heard of an acronym called ALICE, but I will make sure that I share for any individual who is watching this meeting. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. We all know someone who is ALICE, whether they're our family members or a friend. They are working maybe 1 or 2 jobs, trying to make sure they keep stable housing, doing everything they can. They earn too much to receive supportive services, such as maybe even SNAP or Section 8 opportunities or housing choice vouchers, as they're called now, but they don't earn enough to make it. They are the individuals who are literally 1 paycheck away from being homeless. And so United Ways across the country back in the early 2010s started focusing in on who is this population and is there anything that can be done to help support them. And this population ends up being extremely important. They are your managers, they're your childcare workers, they're your teachers, sometimes they're your social workers, maybe even your police or firefighters. And they don't have other options unless people decide to invest in them. What Prosper does is it's a unique program that individuals go to the United Way because they are interested in receiving comprehensive help thinking about their finances. So they receive everything from budgeting education as needed, other wraparound supportive services. Maybe it's to find new housing, a different apartment that might be a little bit more affordable for them. They help with things such as individuals getting to and from work. One of the changes they've made to a program, many United Ways help support programs that can get people to vehicles, but this United Way supports a program that helps fix the one they have. So we're not only being good stewards because that car isn't going to junk or anything like that, but they're making sure that the car is safe and sound while also helping them save to maybe get the hybrid that they've always wanted, maybe even an EV at some point. We heard today from a lovely young woman who finally earns her first home. And when you do that, so many more things open up for you and so many more opportunities. So Prosper really is a comprehensive program. It comes with an infusion of funding for individuals who are eligible. There is $2,500 that's available for that family to help them meet a need, whether it's an immediate need of maybe paying a bill, or maybe it's to help them be able to fix an item, fix a refrigerator, all those things that add up and end up putting someone really behind in their bills and possibly jeopardize their stability. I'm really excited about the program because, as another note, I'm a bit of a ringer. I ran a bank on program for United Way, and that's a particular population that I was really invested in because, quite frankly, they're my family, and they're who my parents were. And I think that with that investment, I believe that this community will thrive and this council will be really surprised at how that supportive services for individuals who are still on lower incomes, but aren't our lowest income, but certainly aren't our highest income. That little infusion of support we heard from 2 individuals today, where it was this one thing that completely changed their trajectory. One individual is in HR at a for-profit company. Another individual, actually, I think now they remember, they might both be in HR, one at the university, one at a private company. And the way that they talk about the opportunities that that little bump gave them is just honestly to warm your heart. But also when we think about the business case, again, that stability helps our employers.
Spending
It helps our community.
$800 a month on
Exactly. $800 a month on Lyft to get to and from work. And that's actually another part of their program. They want a grant from Lyft. And so they're helping people get to and from work. So it's very narrow right now. It's specifically if you need to get to work and there is no other way, no mass transit opportunities, certainly are going to connect them to that. But we do know that there are some places where individuals in our community may work, within our counties, for example, where transit simply at this point doesn't go. And so think of what would happen to everyone's bank account if you suddenly got $800 more a month. Think of what you could do, what you could dream about. So really excited about that program. Happy to answer any questions. We do have data on Alice. I've actually sneakily presented it to you all before, but I can absolutely get you all that information.
So the reason we bring it up is because that program had received $31,000 in the past. It wasn't from the city, it was a grant they got, but they only got 15 this year. And we wanted to see if we can help fill in part of that shortfall of $16,000. So it was the last request I got before I got here. So anyway, so we
Thank you.
throw that into consideration.
I support that.
So one thing we can do is we can change this sheet to kind of memorialize any of these changes. Is that one you want me to add to the list?
Is this how you want us to, is this the time for doing something like that?
Mhm.
Okay.
How much are you saying you want to add?
It's 16. We don't have to.
To make them whole based on the
Right.
previous grant?
I mean, it'd be nice, but I mean, they understand. funding and stuff, and
But a net add of 16 to what we talked to the current budgets, okay?
yes, it was, you know, they got 31 last year, only got it for 15 this year, so the more they get, the more families they'll be able to serve.
So there's also, that I'll offer for you, conversation that council has participated in the past week that I just discovered in leaning over to Ms. Hamill and saying, we forgot one. The Tonsor League indicated a need for consideration to fill the gap that they are now going to face in 2026 because the item that Senator Deeds had presented for a second year of funding was vetoed by the governor. And there does not appear, based on even my direct conversation with Senator Deeds, an opportunity to reconsider that because they get to reconcile that by pushing back to the governor opportunity to possibly get him to change his position. They did not see that in this instance, so that $250,000 grant that they were hoping to get in 26 or for our fiscal year 26 is now gone. And in my conversation with Dr. Bellamy on his abilities to see how to just carry the Tonsor League forward, and his main concern is how to have a league this summer. He identified 25,000. He came back and said 30, but I said I'd already shared 25 with council, so it's up to you on if you consider the 30 was the second number that I heard, but 25,000 was what he had pitched as a part of the conversations that you all participated in
I would
last
support the
week.
30.
I would too. It's a big draw. It's an outlet for many of our community for, I don't know, all summer really. And they expanded things for kids, females. Anyways, it's hopefully next year he'll get the state funding funding
Well,
back.
I am going to try to work with him on, he received a $250,000 grant for this current year that ends in June. I am planning to check with him to see if he will expend all of that and avoid the risk of having to send anything back. Because you've all heard me say I'm not a fan of sending money back. If there is a possibility of getting an extension, so at least his activity period gets extended, there might be a shot at being able to restore a little more for what he was able to spend this past year. He did add things this year that he may not be able to maintain, but I think for where you are on the 30 sounds like what he was looking for in being able to preserve the core components of the league.
Sure.
30? She was waiting to type a number. And right now, this is math, so we're just, is the question that we are really posing at this point is there anything else that you all have been pondering? Because we
Yes.
try to remind you that this is the end of the road, and we are truly down to $394,000 that today, right now, at this moment, is your council strategic initiatives fund.
So,
Any
yeah,
further spending, you're reducing that number
For the
So-
next 15 months.
for the next 15 months. Good point.
so.
We haven't even gotten to the fiscal year, and we've already cut it down.
That's correct.
Well, we never spend it though, Lloyd.
We are already, if we spend everything we've allocated here, we are already, without even having gotten into the fiscal year for which it's allocated, we are already below zero. We've already spent more than we're getting.
I don't understand that.
We start with a reserve, and by the time we allocate all this money, what's left will be less than the present reserve. We will have allocated more money without even having gotten to the fiscal year to cover emergencies yet. We will already have already have allocated more money than we are receiving in new money.
Meaning,
Into the reserve.
if
Because we're not-
$500,000 is the amount that we're supposed to start the year with, we're already gonna be below 500,000 because we've spent,
That and some.
we had the extra money, and then we spent that, and then we went beyond that to spend some of that 500 already.
And in fact, we're below 384, was that the number?
364.
364. We've already spent every penny of the new money and more.
Yeah, but they're telling us they found other places they've saved money.
We've already spent that extra.
Right. So I guess what Lloyd is suggesting is that we don't spend any more right now.
And it is what I'm suggesting, and in particular, I have to say, and maybe I'm just being a process nerd here, but coming up with, at literally the last minute, another $16,000 for something to put into the budget without council as a whole having examined it critically. Admittedly, Deputy City Marshal, Deputy City Manager Marshall knows about it, and the mayor knows about it, but I mean, maybe it's something we want to allocate out of a contingency fund or a strategic initiatives fund after some further examination. But I find myself trying to figure out what possible process we're advancing here. And the answer is, it's still back to whatever anybody throws up against the wall at council at the last minute. And I just think that's a terrible way to do business. We've allocated, we've decided to create a council strategic initiatives fund that will allow us to consider such things in a more orderly course. Admittedly, it's for the next 15 months. And I still don't suggest that we spend that freely. But I find myself really rebelling against the idea that we're going to add, now it's apparently a total of $46,000 without really any deliberation. I object from a process standpoint.
Can you please go back to the slides?
This one? Is it
So
this one you
I'm-
want to see?
I think so. Yeah, we'll go back to the prior slide. Okay, so help me understand, I'm not tracking, it's probably because I'm tired. This is money that you say we have that's discretionary that we can use,
Yes,
of which 500,000 is the Strategic Initiatives Fund.
which is taking your current balance, this 500 is taking your current balance and adding to it, which was the recommendation that I made in the proposed budget.
Okay.
Adding 136,000 to it,
Correct.
basically.
But it's, at this point, we've got the cash behind this.
Yes.
This isn't like
All of this?
Yeah.
Yes,
500, 234, 4, so 915.
is the actual amount that was
Okay.
available, reducing it because of the CDBG change.
Okay, then go to
Yes.
the next slide, please. These are the things we discussed in the last weeks.
Correct.
And Lloyd's point, I guess, is that because the 660 is greater than the 500, we've already gone above the council strategic $500,000. Is that what you're saying, Lloyd?
That's one point that I'm making, yes.
I mean, I understand the other points. So
And
is your point then that you would like to hold on to this $440,000 for rainy day issues that come up in the next 15 months?
Well, I have two thoughts.
Because, I mean, this is the number we're talking about, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I have two thoughts on it. The first is that we do have the rainy day issue, the fact that this is money that is, you know, to be spent for things that haven't yet happened, and we've got more than a full year that's supposed to get us through. So point number one, particularly with all the other uncertainties we're dealing with, that's something that I think we ought to be loath to spend. The second piece is simply the practice of having tonight, I mean, admittedly, we at least had some emails over the last week or so about the Consular League, although there's now a proposal to raise it by another $5,000 over the the amount that was suggested in those emails, and then $16,000 more for the United Way for reasons that sound plausible and sound like they're probably a good idea, but just as a matter of course, I just think that this is a terrible way to do business, to have things thrown up at the last minute.
Yeah. I can appreciate that point.
When we don't need to decide tonight, by the way. We will have 15 months, or at least 3 months, to make that decision in a more principled and more orderly way.
For both the United Way and for Dr. Bellamy?
Sure. I mean, because we're talking about making an allocation that wouldn't be spent until July 1st anyway.
Okay.
Well,
So we have at least 3 months to think about it and to understand it better than any of us does right now.
But one of the things that Sam said was like, this was it to make the decisions?
No, Counselor Snook is correct in that you're not obligated to do this. You could leave the balance and move forward, adopting the budget, agreeing that the Council Strategic Initiatives Fund is at the raised amount that now exists.
It's 440.
440, or I want to make sure we're right on that before I say that that's the number. But
And then
that
that-
number is it. And then, yes, you can choose to, if you want more information, we can get you more information.
It could just come to us as a matter of
And
council
bring those
meeting.
forward, yes. And they would just be a matter of bringing them on council agenda item, as an action item for you to approve the allocation of the
Yeah.
funds.
For me, those amounts are small enough that I'm fine just deciding, but if, I can appreciate the point of wanting more deliberation. So if we want to hold off and people bring them to us in a city council meeting in a couple, months, that's fine, and we can vote then. I don't think it'll change anything. I think there's 3 people at least who'll vote for them.
And there's presently no process for judging submissions through the Council Strategic Initiatives Fund. It's basically
Right.
Right, 'cause
essentially who
it's
gets to
yours.
us first.
Correct, it's
So
yours. I mean, I think,
That doesn't get kicked into a process of evaluation.
yeah, I'll be honest and say that I understand the sentiments that are being expressed. And I am a person of rule and order, and I have offered on more than one occasion process. And I've also been reminded that you all prefer to have some discretion at the end. So I'm respecting that, and I've tried my best to bring you the best version forward that I can, with me compromising a little bit of what I would prefer, because that's not my job to make the decision. I'm here to bring it forward. And I understand and appreciate the last minute nature of it, and I'm not a fan of always doing that. And I think in these 2 moments specifically, we can identify a way to bring you critical information so that you can have that presented to you. And then you can make that determination on if you believe the item is ready to go forward, and we can bring that item forward. Ms. Marshall can bring you more details on the Prosper program and stand before you at a council meeting and make the request, the same as we can have Dr. Bellamy do the same, or have the United Way come themselves. The issue is, when you open that door that way, others will always attempt to come through the door the same way.
Yep.
We're going to need to figure out a way to not have you bombarded with many ongoing requests, because the Vibrant Community Fund program and HOPS and CAF is your process. And we have been reluctant to require everyone to go there and only there. So we have more or less compromised to make it where we can still preserve the opportunity for discretion. So this is our best attempt at working with you on what feels right, because we do want the Vibrant Community process to uphold and really stand up to your review. I almost said scrutiny, but it is both. Your scrutiny and review, so that we can continue to maintain quality relationships with the community reviewers that we engage. They feel undermined if we change too much. So we're trying to balance that.
And I appreciate all of that. And we every year with VCF, we have the same conversation. And I think it gets better every year. And I think we're always going to face, Dr. Bellamy couldn't help what happened with the,
Sure.
and I think I realize that every dollar that we appropriate, we have to be judicious about. On the other hand, in terms of scale, these are relatively small things. And, you know, exercising the machine, the bureaucratic machine, to have it come before us again, I think, you know. The United Way one, I'm a little more frustrated about because I think they could have come earlier to appeal. We did have that process. And I also feel like with the United Way, they're a fundraising machine. So they'll find that $16,000. I don't think Dr. Bellamy's going to find the 25, 30 that he needs.
We know why the Tonsor League funding situation got a little wonky. Do we know why, or did United Way participate in VCF and we didn't allocate, or is this a new request entirely out of that cycle?
Councilor Oshrin, if I recall, what it is that the United Way did receive less funding in the VCF process this year than before. You will see it listed in VCF as the Financial Resiliency Task Force, because that is the old name for it. It has been revamped as this title of Prosper as of February of this year, to expand on the program a little bit more. And so I know that that is the reason why they have less funding for that financial resiliency work, is because of that. Now, again, I do not rate, so I don't know why. Unfortunately, I cannot give you any of those answers, nor would you want me to. That'd be a little biased. But that is my understanding as to what occurred, where they do have a loss of dollars. And yeah.
Okay, so, sorry, when you first presented, it was my understanding that this was a new request. I didn't know that a type of it had gone through VCF.
Yes, and I was trying to come up to just kind of explain the program. So I also just, again, want to be very clear. I am not asking for money on behalf of United Way.
Yes.
Nor am I asking for any changes to happen with their VCF allocation.
Yeah, so that's what it sounds like. They went through the VCF process. They were recommended for funding at a lower amount than what they requested, which is a cut based on what they had received the prior year. And that is what amounts to the 16,000, if I'm piecing together what I think has happened there.
Okay.
So this would be the consideration of what you all did for Loaves and Fishes, Lighthouse Studios.
Yes.
In that moment,
Yes.
that would have been the more perfect time, because you would have had that on the list of consideration.
Yeah,
is
and
what
so,
it
sorry,
sounds
my
like.
understanding was that the 31 they got was not from us.
Oh, as a separate, external
Yeah, I
grant.
thought that was a
Got it.
different grant, and we were helping them make that up. I didn't
Okay.
realize that was our grant. That
Which would have
we
been,
had-
which in that case would have made it a loss, similar to the Tonsor League getting cut by the governor's budget.
Right, I thought
see
they were
what
the
you're saying.
same style of request.
Yeah.
Right, and I have to be honest, I just heard about this, because of the name switch, I didn't realize I thought it was a grant as well, so that's kind of how I explained it to you all.
So I will submit again, we can get the information, and as Ms. Marshall is trying to walk that fine line about not showing a bias for anything, we can gather the information, bring the item forward, make sure that you understand exactly what happened in that transaction. I think that is reasonable for making sure that you appreciate what the
Yeah.
request
Because
is.
we do have, I mean, there is the process
Yes,
of appealing and coming back and presenting, and we didn't get that from them.
right.
Do we have we don't have a process on spending the strategic fund, and we probably should come up with one?
Yeah, I don't know how to do that for you.
Yeah,
So I think
so maybe
I'm
that's-
happy to engage in conversation with you around that.
That might be something
That
we should
is,
talk about. at
I
some
think
point.
ultimately that's what I was getting to in pointing out the recommendation to increase the amount and then to basically encourage you to think more about it. I am, as I said, planning to pull together what will be a retreat, and I think this is the kind of topic that would give us the ability to do that. This whole thing came from a prior council choosing to set aside funds for them to make some decisions and do some things. It was a choice of things to do. I, of course, would like you to have a process because, one, we're going to continue to get requests from the public saying, well, how do I get council to consider this and how to consider that? So it would be helpful to set up some parameters. The off-cycle request is really what I have said is the process, that if anything comes in and it's outside of a competitive round, it goes in a file on my desk and it will sit there until I bring it to you. And when I bring it to you, it will be with enough information for you to be able to look at it and say, yes, we should do this, or no, we won't do this. Very similar to what we did before.
Yeah, great. I think that's,
And if you want more of a process, I am
Yeah.
happy to go down that rabbit hole with you, but I
So-
think that's really the
Well,
easy way to
So
do
for
it.
tonight, are we basically saying United Way, they had their opportunity several weeks ago and didn't come?
I mean, I think it's, that sounds punitive, but it is kind of out of process, and we do have time. I think we're all probably in agreement. Tonsillar League, we've gotten more background info about. We had emails, we've talked about it more than just today suddenly. So I think let's move forward with the 30 for that, and then let's have United Way come.
Yeah, we
You know,
can do
maybe
that.
they were busy and they couldn't come that day. Let's give them a chance to come and just chat with us about it quickly.
Okay, well, we can coordinate, bring in more information for us.
Does everyone sound
Yeah, so
good
we're in
about that?
support of Tonsillar for tonight
I
and,
think three of us are, maybe three.
right,
Three or
I
four.
mean, the majority for Tonsillar tonight and United Way to come back later.
We'll put a pin in that one.
Yeah,
Okay,
And just to be clear, I'm only partly concerned about process for the discretionary funds or the strategic initiatives fund. I'm really more concerned about criteria. What kinds of things do we regard as a strategic initiative? Typically, I don't think of giving an already functioning organization another $15,000 or $20,000 as
Well-
being a strategic initiative. And if we don't mean it to be a strategic initiative fund, then let's change the name of it and do whatever we want to do. But if we're going to call it a strategic initiatives fund and justify it on that basis, then I think we ought to have some criteria that fall in line with that.
I think that's a great point, and that's probably why we should have a work session.
that's the conversation I
Yes,
think we
yes.
can have.
Yeah, because right
Yes.
now
Yeah.
we don't. It's
Because, and
just
we
a-
have our list of strategic initiatives, so is it, you know, specifically for that, or is it broader? So I think that's, even though those are pretty broad.
I would say that, yeah, they need to be
Yeah.
a little finer to that, because anything can fit into what we've come up with.
Yeah.
So I think I would
So-
love the help from you
Yeah.
to focus
So I
that,
think we've got a topic for
absolutely.
a retreat.
And I did capture that, so
To
I
the
kind of
point about
anticipated.
rainy day. Sure.
Someone-
Yeah, to the point about rainy day, we have other funds for rainy day. We have contingencies. And we
That are
have-
still available, yeah.
Yeah, that are
Surplus.
totally separate from this.
Yes,
Yeah. And I just want to confirm that the Jefferson rent, that is already baked in.
that's what we're
I mean,
doing
we're
there.
recommended-
That's what the highlighted green
Okay,
section
good.
was, our capturing that, because again, that's just our owning that
Yeah.
there was a mistake made there. I'll just share, just again, for public benefit there, I've had conversation with Dr. Douglas. I shared with her that it's my desire that we steer away from the notion that the city council is supporting the rent payment for the African American Heritage Center. That's not really what we're doing. We're supporting the African American Heritage Center. They use the money for whatever operational expense that they may have. That's really what that is meant to reflect. So as she, going forward, will submit her request to us to the city, it will be anticipated that she's telling you what the African American Heritage Center is doing. So it's their scope and scale of projects, things that they're doing, what's new, how many people have attended, come through the center, that kind of thing. Because in that moment, this is more of a partnership opportunity, that you're preserving heritage and culture by supporting an organization like this. So that $200,000 doesn't have to be exclusively tied to rent, and therefore, if she got a grant for rent somewhere else, then it would preclude her from coming to you.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be that.
And also to go way back, I was a few minutes late, so it might have already been covered. That $250,000 for tax relief, is that just covering the gap between the amount of qualifying applications that came in?
He's
and-
coming back. I don't know why he didn't just stay up here. I told him to sit with us.
We found, we kind of just wrapped up real estate tax relief for elderly and disabled folks, and we've found that we've got a lot more applicants than we've had in the past. What happened was I instructed my folks to encourage CHAP applicants who were over 65 to apply for the elderly and disabled program because it's more beneficial for them. They did, by a lot. I didn't
They
realize.
listened to you.
Yeah, they listened to me.
What a thought.
Yeah, I gave them advice that was in their best interest. So we had a lot of folks switch over from CHAP to real estate. And it's a more generous program for them. And so that's the difference.
So it's just a gap between the number of qualified applicants that came in versus the funding available?
Correct, yeah, basically. It's the first time in 12 years that we've gone over.
Right.
But we went over.
Okay.
But that's what you want. I mean,
that was it. Thank
we
you.
want to,
Yeah.
we want to help those folks. So I guess it's good news.
So I'm gonna toot our commissioner's horn because he won't toot his own horn. We have had conversations about just trying to make sure that we push more information out and try to encourage people who might be eligible to really attach themselves to this program. This is really a sign that they did that his team has done that. So we do thank you for that.
Thank
Todd.
you.
It means we were able to reach the people who needed it.
Correct.
So we're trying.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Todd.
So, this came up, was it last night? Was Impact last night?
Tuesday.
I feel like we're
Listen
bearing
up.
the lead here, man. You go ahead.
Oh, yeah, oh, yes.
So a funny thing happened on the way to the meeting tonight. On Tuesday night, the mayor and I went to the Impact meeting, and I think you've been given the preview of this. So fortunately, we weren't the county. They really got a close eye. But the challenge for us was around transit drivers. And I know y'all gave us some really helpful information about the fact that we really are better than they think we are and that kind of thing. But that group, and honestly, I agree with them, otherwise I wouldn't have agreed with them in the meeting, along with Juan. They want to see us commit to getting the 67 hired by the end of this year and getting 82 in the budget for this coming fiscal year, this budget. Now, I told them that that was not technically possible because of where we were.
Just confirm, you said 82 in the FY 26 budget is what that request was?
That was the request.
Yeah.
Yes.
just
Okay.
quickly-
I just want to make sure I'm hearing
Which
you
is the
right.
30-minute,
Across
Yeah.
the network.
and
Salary and benefits, each driver is 88,000 roughly.
Because of the bargaining contract, that's a little bit high, but for purposes of this, we can talk about it
Okay.
at 80.
80, okay.
so that's 15 more than the 67?
Yeah, so we tried to clear it up. I believe the number is 66. So it's actually 66
Right.
allocated positions, so
Yep.
it's not 67.
Yeah.
66 positions, and by last check-in, we're
Too short.
we're still too short of that. So I think the first part of what you're identifying as the commitment of having those filled by the end of this current fiscal year, we are doing everything in our power to make that possible.
Yep.
But we don't control that. That's just who makes it
Understood.
through the process. But yes, we are on track to ensure that we can do that based on how we've been able to fill the other vacancies up to this point.
And then it's 82 less, that's 18 more drivers?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm calling him our relief because I don't need to overstate.
16.
16. Okay, good. I'm supposed to know how to count, right? Y'all let me doing all this stuff.
We let Chrissy do the counting.
Yeah.
That is why I have Chrissy on my hip
Just
right
don't
here.
ask my husband, he says I can't do math. I think it's actually closer to 78,000, Counselor Payne, for
Okay.
a driver.
82 less
So 1.2 million.
82 less 66
16 drivers.
times. Yeah.
Christie, when you are calculating that, that's full freight, that's not including the part that the county would pay if we were doing this
That's correct.
as part of the normal budget?
That was my question. Was last year we allocated 600,000 for drivers last minute, which means the county
Did not
did
contribute
not
to that.
contribute to that. So we ended
They're
up.
realizing that in this year's
Correct.
funding
So
request.
so those drivers that we allocated for last year, in this upcoming budget, the county is contributing to their
That's
pay.
correct.
So if we allocated the funds at this moment to more drivers, it would be a year of us footing the
That's
bill
right.
without
You would-
contributions
We
from
would
the
carry that
county.
for the full year, and we would edit their request that we would make for FY '27 to account for that decision and anything else that comes up
Do we
between now
get-
and then.
Do we get back pay?
No credit, no, ma'am.
Right, so,
Back pay from the county.
It'd be hard to pull off. I think I'm good. I don't know that I'm that good.
So,
so if we wanted more bus drivers, incorporating that into the budget earlier would be more beneficial so we could get the county on board and they can get more
Yes.
buses as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that speaks
they're
back to
always
what we
gonna be-
outlined as the process that we're looking at over the course of the remainder of the spring and the summer.
say that again.
Well, when we spoke last time, we were talking about the fact that we are planning for a series of meetings with, starting with council and then incorporating the county as well to talk about what service outcomes we're seeking that we can, so that we're rolling that into our budget planning for the FY '27 budget.
So we're setting it up
So
for
we're setting
next
up
year,
for next year so that it's an early consideration in the budget process.
so the county can be involved from the start.
the
They
county
can
is involved from
allocate
the
that
start.
fund
Yeah.
those funds as well. Since the county is now contributing more this year, that means that 600,000 that we set aside last year can stretch a little further in some way, or how does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that would have meant that we ask you for more to ensure that that was still considered extra.
So we're planning a series of meetings with, is that enough, one of those joint meetings with city and county?
We're trying to determine that, but I think what Deputy Freeze is saying to you is, we're planning this now
Right.
because we're anticipating the asks are actually getting bigger and they're going to become more consistent. As we look at all that we have talked about in expansion of transit, this isn't going to be the last time, so that's why we're applying this new approach to getting started on the considerations ahead of our budget cycle, is what he's proposing.
Well, like I
to be
told
able
them
to
the
do
other
that.
night, I was like, look, folks, we're literally in the middle of finalizing our budget. But
Right.
to be clear, there is a process that we can amend the budget, correct?
If you have some revenue for the basis to amend, yes,
Okay.
yes.
The economy's looking
So, so just to clarify, instead of this year allocating, here's $600,000, we allocated funds for what it would cost for our share of the positions. And then.
You're saying last year or this year? For this budget, this
for
proposed budget?
This proposed
Right.
budget cycle. So instead of saying, it was like 8 more drivers, I think. So instead of
Mhm.
saying, here's $600,000 on those 8 drivers, we said, here's what you need to cover the 8 drivers, our share. The county contributes that share. And then there was a little leftover money from that 600 that got spent somewhere else.
There wasn't anything left. Because actually, we increased what we were asking, because we added a mechanic for FY '27, so that's an increased expense.
Right, so it got spent elsewhere.
So the 600,000 basically paid for the budget for this year.
Yes.
Because the 600,000 was the additional for the total transit,
FY '25.
total CAT budget, correct. Move forward to 26, now that's the base budget, and then whatever you would add or not, that base budget is then split with the city and the county based on those percentages, but there's not like any leftover from 25.
Right, but that $600,000 allocated toward those positions is not solely coming from the city.
It did in '25. It's not.
Not in this proposed
26.
budget.
Correct.
Yes. So then our share of that
Mm-hmm.
was covered in full got spent somewhere else.
Well, it just got absorbed as part of the city's share for the cap budget because it went up
Yeah, it's
another
spent somewhere else in
600,000.
cat.
Yeah,
Somewhere, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
you.
so, and this is maybe coming up in the fall when we meet with the county or your meetings with them, is that I heard that the county is want to expand microcat, which is essentially Lyft, or, it's kind of it's not transit as we traditionally know it, and, I think that traditional transit is much more efficient, but I understand, why they, doing what they're doing now. So, anyway, I just, that is something that will come up, I'm sure,
Yeah.
when we meet.
Yeah, I've got one more question about the buses. I was told that, one of the other requests we get from Impact over the last couple of years is to reduce the headways specifically on 5 and 7. And I was recently told that we can't specify 2 lines until all of them are at 30-minute headways, or else we get investigated by the feds.
I don't think, that's not exactly
that
how it works,
simple,
no. No, it's more that there's an expectation that we are equitably funding and improving the different lines, right? That we're not, so effectively what they're really looking for is that we're not putting all of our money into lines that serve higher income people. That we're ensuring that where there is improvements made to a line that serves one demographic, there is also improvements put into a line that serves a different demographic.
So it's about balancing.
Balanced.
Okay.
So what I'll say to you, there's a couple things there as well that I would offer. We know that 5 and 7 are the highest ridership. I think that's the push. That's the
Right.
reason for
Right.
trying to get them to 30 minutes as quickly as possible. You're potentially sacrificing the idea that some of your individuals that are on those routes are still optional riders. You have other routes that are not optional riders, that if their routes don't get better, they are struggling to make life happen just because the routes are taking as long as they take. It is about balancing. So I would say to you that the FTA's consideration on how we are making our system better, they would be looking for us to do that in as fair and balanced a way as we possibly can, because those riders who have no choice deserve the priority, because that's the only choice that they have. And anyone else who may be electing to use it, while it does defeat the purpose that they penalize us for having fewer people riding the bus, that you don't take that ridership as the top priority for fixing service. You have to do all of it, and you have to spread it out to the best of your ability, which through the reporting that we showed you, our efforts at this point, we've eliminated 75-minute routes, period. The fact that, and I shared with you in this room, I guess a year and a half ago or whenever, that a 75-minute route occurring more than once in our system should be unacceptable, period. And for that reason, every extra dollar we could find should have been poured into those routes alone. I don't know that FTA would have necessarily said that was a bad idea, because 75 minutes is just unacceptable, but they would have still questioned us on who's the demographic on those routes. Because it still would have been deemed unfair to try to prioritize, because you would look as though you're attempting to favor one over the other, but income does come out as a factor. I don't know if today's federal government is going to continue thinking that way, but it really is about balance, because Route 6 serves most of our public housing sites. Those routes should be as quickly and repetitive as possible, because they don't really have a choice. So if we were hearing push 6, push 6, push 6, which is what you heard from Interim City Manager Rogers, which is why he was focused on that, we might have a case to go back to the federal government to talk about. And I'm not saying that 5 and 7 aren't important. I'm just saying that we've got to structure our improvements so that we don't get that attention. That's what I think people are probably responding to, that if we do it in an imbalanced way, we do get the microscope.
Okay.
There's a way to do it. Like there's the Richmond circulator model, but
Mhm.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm sure
Mhm.
that also include evaluating the system at the whole, but they did really target the most frequent
Sure,
route.
sure.
Um,
And I think what we're suggesting as the team that is CAT, that has been doing the work, is we're getting better, even though if our transit director was sitting in that chair next to Mr. Freeze, he would tell you, still isn't where I want it to be. But we've been happy in seeing that the red line has disappeared completely, because that was what troubled me the most.
Well, I'll just say, I'm sure it was on video.
I didn't go look, I was waiting for you to
Yeah.
tell me.
So, yeah, you know, one thing is interesting, well, I won't digress too much, but I find those meetings hard. And like they said, they're supposed to be uncomfortable. And it is interesting, the version of the questions they gave us before we actually got up there were much,
It's different.
yeah. But at the same time, I don't disagree with them. And I think when you see, just to sort of be brutally honest, when you've got an auditorium of, I don't know, the median demographic there, that was mostly white, mostly upper middle class, you know, people that clearly see the value for transit for everyone in this community, particularly the folks you were just referring to. I think that's, for me, that's activism at its best. There's a lot of activism we get that feels like we're, well, you know, but I think that it is speaking to a set of values that we all hold to. And I think, you know, I really feel like now's the time to, I know we've done a lot of work. You've shown me the charts. I believe it. I see it. One of the things I thought afterwards was, well, as opposed to 82 drivers, what if I gave you guaranteed 14 minutes or something, you know? And that may be where we end up in conversations with them. But I think having the focus on the number of drivers keeps everyone clear-minded that this is a fiscal priority. This is something we're going to have to make significant investments in to obtain. So I will be continuing to bring this up because I made a public commitment. It takes 3 people to get a vote, and I know that, and the mayor was there as well, but.
Do you have an identified funding source or cuts to get there?
That's, you know, I think we're going to talk about that next year's Nehemiah impact. Just kidding. No, I have some ideas. I'm being sarcastic and silly, but yeah.
City council salaries.
Yeah, there you go.
1/10.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But I think what I hear that I think we're all in agreement on is, for a variety of reasons in terms of what we put in at the beginning of the budget cycle as priorities, as well as decisions on the tax rates, we've put ourselves in a very difficult position for figuring out how we get to that $1.2 million. But we know it should have been one of our top first coming in priorities if we're going to meet our transit goals. So if there's some identified cuts to get there, I'm open to it. I have no idea what they would be. Obviously, tax rates aren't an option at this point. If there's not a way to get there this year, could you just outline again what the process would look like to guarantee, or better guarantee, that going into next year's budget, it starts as one of our top priorities?
I mean, fundamentally, that is having that conversation beginning really this summer.
Now.
Right, now, effectively, right? Hey, we could say we've begun it, we're having it now. But that's fundamentally what we need to do, because there's a lot of decisions that need to be made in the transit space as we're looking at our objectives of what we're trying to accomplish with that system. Not only in improving the service, as we've talked about, but we also have talked a lot about the investments we want to make in terms of alternative fuel buses. There are both the idea of improving our service and changing the fuels are necessitating a look at our facilities as well. And we need to start thinking about that as kind of longer term, but not that long term investments we need to make. And as we talked about before, as we expand the service, as buses are on the road more frequently, as more buses are on the road more frequently, our need for other support staff in the maintenance world, in customer service, and in supervisory roles also goes up. So none of those are bad things. We just need to plan for them together, because we're kind of hitting the tipping point in the service that we're providing, that we need to start thinking about those kind of other things beyond the drivers.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. And at a minimum, we're looking at about $1.2 million, either in this budget, which again, I'm open to any ideas, but I just have no idea what it would be. And then if it's next year, just keeping at a minimum that 1.2, but it sounds like once you add in the increased maintenance workers, it's more than that.
It's not
Whatever we
1.2.
need, and I think that's part of the value of the conversations, is then we can hone in on what are we going to accomplish next year, and what are we going to start planning for in kind of out years, kind of building a.
And I think there's room for,
Improvement plan
for
for that.
discussion about, the goal should not be, we just need to have 82 drivers. The goal needs to be the service
Yeah.
and showing the data, which you guys are doing. I think that's going to be essential. I mean, I know conversations about the surplus will be something that will be ongoing, but this is something for me that at least a partial fund of this through the surplus for a partial number of those drivers is something that I'm very much open to discussing.
And I mean, something that I mentioned on Tuesday night as well is that we want to be able to to compensate our drivers, and part of that, this year's increase in transit was towards compensation to drivers, and also the money that we put towards affordable housing, the $10 million, $12 million, depending on the year. That's part of it. Is our commitment towards workers like the transit drivers as well. So, but anyway, so.
Could I ask one other question related to this? How many more buses do we need to buy before we can get to the 30-minute headway?
I don't know the answer. I don't know that we need to buy any more buses at this point.
I think we have like 46 and 23 operate because 23 are consistently getting fixed, something like that.
Yeah, I
So
I
we
don't know
have
the answer to
buses
that,
around that we could make operational.
And keep in mind, I think for the quality of service for many people who rely on it for jobs, part of it is that how late the hours are is still reduced pre-pandemic, as well as weekend service significantly going
Right.
pre-pandemic. So if my memory is correct, 82 drivers, I don't think we even need more buses, but that could be wrong, just because of what service was pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
I think if we got to the point of having that many drivers, there probably is a shortage, because if I'm remembering correctly, the drain on the number of buses that we have is just keeping them running.
And we also
So,
have like a hydrogen.
Because
not
we have,
hydrogen,
still
Hybrid.
have those
Hybrid model
hybrid,
that's very
we still have the
bad.
hybrid within the fleet. And until those are gone, then we still have somewhat of a strain. It's probably not a large number of buses, but I think there are a few more that we would have to get.
I don't think for every 3 drivers, there's a need for a supervisor, I think was the,
I don't know
I
that
think
that's
that
the,
seems like a high ratio. Yeah.
But I think that's part of what, and I understand all of it, and I'm thankful I am not an elected individual. So if I keep you all happy, then I'll keep my job. But I think that's part of why we have proposed to you that we wanted to do the analysis and bring you the data. This guy's been pushing me for, we need to explain it a little bit more, and that's what we did. I think it was important for you to be able to see that the improvements are happening. It's not as though we're sacrificing improvements. We're gaining on what it is that we set out to do and making the system better. There are challenges with the fact that not only are we trying to improve the system and its just performance with what we have, we're also trying to innovate at the same time, and not in a small way, in a huge way. It's very expensive what we have on the table right now.
I think we've got to confront, one, we're going to need to expand the facilities no matter what, in terms of if we're just expanding route frequency and reliability. The zero emissions plan was fundamentally based on the fact that federal government money would
Yep.
take an enormous amount of that cost off the city. We can be almost assured that all of that is going to be cut, most of it is already cut. I think we need to keep those plans if a different administration comes in and restores that funding. But there is, I think we just have to confront that. I think it is literally impossible for the city to implement that plan with the cuts to the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law. So I think we just have to kind of bake that in.
Well,
Because it
and
was
I
based on federal money.
Absolutely. And I was going there and saying to you, and that has to be part of this conversation, because there are decisions that need to be made now to support what we have agreed to. And if we're going to confront it and make the determination that we don't see that actually happening on the original schedule, then there are certain decisions that we get to make. It actually relieves pressure so that we can stay focused on the network improvements if that is really what we're going to concentrate
And
on.
I've said this before, but our job is to take stock and reconsider as we go. And the situation that we are working within has dramatically changed. And that's, if we're looking for our highest and best dollar value, return on investment, opportunity cost, all of that, if that is something we need to reconsider to improve service before anything else, I think that, as Michael said, we're in a different environment, and
Because you were looking for some of the major infrastructure pieces, opportunities for the federal government, or through it, the state government covering
Absolutely.
70-80%.
That's right.
Sometimes even more of some of these costs.
And we're
that's
already hearing
flexibility
adjustments.
we'll have to be
Yeah, we're already
aware
hearing
of.
adjustments, so it's a reality, and now we've got to continue to bring you the information as it affects this system. We're going to not worry
Yeah.
about everybody else's. How does it affect this system?
Yeah, and I agree with what's, what they're saying. Natalie and Michael, I think they're absolutely right. And the other thing, though, and this should be obvious from a climate perspective, even if we're using diesel buses, newer diesel buses are less greenhouse gas producing, they're more efficient than they were years ago. But if we're getting people out of their cars and onto buses,
and
that's-
bikes,
yeah, and bikes,
You're still making improvements.
we're making,
end user improvements.
yeah.
Although not to sidetrack us, but the data is relatively clear that to break even on emissions for a diesel bus, we would have to like 2.5x our current ridership. Otherwise, you don't actually break even emissions-wise. So anyway, that's not to drag us down there.
But service
But
is the
one
only
more
way.
point, one more
Yeah.
point down that road, is I just want to keep in mind also of our city's of the pie chart of our city emissions, the slice that the city actively contributes to is 5%. So that end user side of things is the other 95%. And
Right.
so the decisions we make can help affect that
Mhm.
other 95% beyond just the 5%. So those are opportunity costs we have to think about as well. If we're
Right.
spending money on something that affects the 5%, if we spend that money on something else, would it affect some of that 95% at a greater
Sure.
return? So,
So you can anticipate that that is one of the big conversations, in addition to how it's being outlined by Mr. Freeze and what we're going to be talking through and how we're going to work through analyzing this. The confronting of the situation that we find ourselves in, the political situation that we have on what the impacts to federal funding may be to the plans that we've set. We really do need to make that an urgent conversation because it influences real decisions on the table right now, and all of them have a local financial impact, and we've got to be ready to be able to deal with those things.
Yeah, and the one last piece I'd add to that is CARTA. So if CARTA now exists, I'm sitting here with my fellow board member, and, depending on what happens in Richmond this fall, if we're able to get the option for a sales tax or something like that, that's probably a couple of years out. But that is one of the long-term strategic moves this community is making to have an alternate revenue stream for transit. So maybe that'll help, Michael.
Do you feel like there's sufficient clarity in terms of the question of 82 drivers? I guess both for Sam and other counselors?
I think what I heard was that you are not going to attempt to unpack the budget at this late stage and find a way to make 82 drivers a reality. But what you are indicating is that you support the desire for added drivers, and that you're looking to have us revisit that with you at some point in the future, later in 2025, for the possible consideration of a use of one-time funds for the bridge that would be required to get us to the next budget where we would realize the true cost. I would remind you in that, as I've talked to our budget director earlier today about this, was that in doing so, in making that bridge decision, you are spending the money before you know what you have. So we would be going into our projections for FY '27 with that being a ticket that is due upon receipt. It is not up for discussion. If we would have hired however many of the 16 additional drivers, we must pay for them
And
first.
I'll just say, just me personally, I totally understand the impetus to do it. I'm particularly in this environment, I'm very, very, very nervous about spending any surplus money for recurring expenses, just because a recession is likely, potentially something far more significant than a recession. Municipal bond yields are going up, so I just worry it's feasible our budget could actually contract next year.
Sure.
And I'll just say too, in that light, you know, collective bargaining contracts are fixed costs that are already ticket items that have to be paid for before we, you know, know what our revenues are. Debt service is increasing. We've moved up, you know, we're paying for Buford, which was a big bond issue. We've got Walker, which is coming on. That's another $30 million. So your debt service is going to be rising. So we are building in fixed costs ahead of more fixed costs than we've had in the past,
And not-
as we head into new budgets.
And not to derail us, if the answer is not known, it's fine. Maybe this is something for the finance committee. I'm curious, kind of, if municipal bond yields do go up significantly, given that we have very significant bondable projects that are going to be coming out, kind of like the difference in the yields, how big an impact on our budget is that? Because I don't know if it's something we should really be worried about or be a little worried about, or
We're watching it closely. I can tell you that, over the last few years with our debt projections, we've been basically projecting at about 3%. Our financial advisors we've bumped that to 4%. So the numbers you've been seeing this year are a whole percent higher than that. We're also getting a double whammy because the cost of construction is higher, materials are higher, and then debt costs are higher. So it will, you know, who knows what your crystal ball says. You know, many years when we were at almost 0% interest rates, 1%, every year I'd come and say, we're never going to get interest rates this low again. And then it happened multiple years in a row. So it's kind of like when we project the revenues, you know, I think it was the 24 budget when we were looking at revenues, national economists were saying there was going to be a huge recession. It didn't happen. So anybody's guess, but to your point, we should proceed cautiously.
During the budget cycle last year, you have thoroughly got it into my head. No one-time money for recurring funds, so that is a mantra that I've taken to heart, so I would agree.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. She actually praised me for that earlier today. So what I'll say.
But I would,
Yes.
I would say, knowing that this is something that, you know, Charlottesville's been, you know, in a rebuilding year, and now we're like ready to, let's be built on buses especially. It's a priority for the community, for us on here, so let's kind of bake that in a little earlier.
Sure.
For next year.
So what I'll say to you, just to kind of complete me acknowledging that I'm hearing you, that we understand what you're asking. We will do our deliberate work of evaluating what it is that we're hearing you say at this point. If we're talking like come back to you in the fall, mid-October or something to that effect, we will be in the throes of opening up the budget process with the team. They'll be identifying all the various things that they need and want us to be considering. It would be an interesting time for us to take on that consideration for one-time use to bridge to the budget. And again, if that were to turn out to be the case, We would be spending ahead. It would cause me some grief and heartburn, I'll be honest, and that would mean that that would influence the budget message to the team. I would tell them, be extra conservative. Do not bring all the many things, because there really would be no reason to. If we were to agree to increasing the number of drivers and it becomes a $400,000 or $500,000 proposition, that does eliminate a lot of the space and choice for any other considerations. Understanding that's the priority in hearing what you're saying. We can balance all of that. And again, my goal is to be as deliberate and intentional in whatever I bring to you. And it will come to you whether I recommend it or not. I will always assure you, I'm here to serve you. So I will bring it to you if that is what you request. And I will share with you what the staff position is on the request.
It sounds like there's a lot of work that's sort of being planned and a lot of conversations already underway that need to, and will happen hopefully in the early part of the summer.
Yeah.
That sort of the technical pieces and the financial questions that have been raised about, you know, what happens with these investments that we're planning to do given the federal situation.
And
I
more
think if we
clarity
can-
on the federal situation, just with time.
Yeah, and if we can flesh some of that out, I think that's essential.
Right.
And then maybe we'll also have a little more clarity on, you know, what we can expect politically in Richmond.
So the last thing that I intended to share, because Chrissy has one more slide, there is a little conversation you all need to have about the schedule. Just kind of acknowledging that Fed Watch moment that I had in presenting the budget to you and how I'm continuing to track. We do continue to hear things at this moment in time, just for, of course, for the public's benefit. The City of Charlottesville organization has not realized a loss yet. Like we've been good so far, so good. But are we alarmed about things? Absolutely. We're hearing more things, so the picture is getting a little clearer in some instances. I do believe that it's critical for us to hold on to as much of our surplus as we can for what is likely to be impacted outside of us and or inside. The considerations that are being had, the conversations that are being had in regards to SNAP and Medicaid are real in that they're big. And if those cuts were to occur, we will see a number of our constituency impacted directly by that. And there is no gap unless you begin to consider doing some things. If we have SNAP interruption, we have a whole team of people that's what they do all day long. That's the question. How does that work? My goal, of course, would be to mitigate that we're not talking about reduction in force, because we think there will be an increase in the number of people applying for what is the program that remains. So we're not worried about losing people. We're worried about getting help to the people. So I think it would be incumbent upon us to be very judicious in the use of those funds. While it is a great blessing to have a surplus of the size that we have, it is going to go fast when we start spending it.
Heard that.
And hopefully we don't have big surpluses like that coming. We do not see surpluses like that coming in the future.
Although I might take it going forward based on what this feels like.
Yeah. So one last thing, Monday, we will actually meet to vote on the budget. We will make the amendments that we've discussed tonight, and that will be reflected. We'll be voting to adopt the budget. April 21st will be a public hearing on the real property tax rates. That'll be advertised in the paper on Saturday, April 12th. We'll have that public hearing on the 21st. According to state law, you cannot hear that and vote on the same night. There must be 3 days in between. So we have set a special meeting for April 24th. Did we decide on a time?
And we need to, that's where you all have indicated that there's enough. We can have the meeting on the 24th. The mayor's indicated that he's not available, but asked us to push on. But we need to determine the time, and I think there's conflicts with what works for you all. So I wanted to make sure that you all could try to flesh that out this evening, because we are trying to make sure that we broadcast this more to the public as well.
I think Natalie and I are done by 6,
Is there any reason why we couldn't do it at like 9
Oh,
AM?
a.m.?
oh,
Okay.
Sorry, a.m. a.m. in the morning, or like 8:30 or something. So it's like,
We had a conversation I'll share that. We had a conversation internally about an alternate time. I would, me personally, caution you on that, just for the the concern that people will express that you had a meeting in the middle of the day, the work day, where they would not then be able to participate, and we've had all the other meetings in the evening.
yeah.
I just offer that for consideration. I think you can do whatever. It's a special meeting, so you're
Well,
free to do that.
Right. I'm trying to avoid the work day for us too. So either like real early or,
it was 6 work right after RTP's on, like.
well, Lloyd
Council
indicated
Snook
he
had
had a meeting at
Yeah.
at
Well, I mean,
6.
6 would be a little bit better than 6:30.
6 is great.
Okay. So if 6 would work,
6:05. I mean, like we'll be on our way.
sure.
We're coming from across the street.
6:15.
I mean, we would be waiting because Vice Mayor would be running the meeting at
Yeah.
that point.
That meeting will be done by probably 5:30.
Yeah. We'll say 6, but we might be a couple minutes.
Okay, so we can go with advertising 6, understanding that you might be trailing in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll make sure that that gets out. I've already gotten press requests to kind of explain what has happened, and I'm going to try to continue to point out that we had an error. We corrected the error on our own. We weren't forced to correct it. We acknowledged that a mistake was made, and we worked that out. But I'm going to make sure that we get this out to everyone, that this is the remaining steps in our process.
And that meeting would be, hey, we have a vote, and
And it's on concluding the property
15
tax
minutes,
consideration,
yeah.
yes.
The only thing you'll get that you haven't, no, that's Monday night as well, the PPTRA. So,
That'll
yeah.
be an action item.
Yeah, so it should be fast.
okay.
So that's all that we have for you this evening.
So any other questions or comments from, excuse me, council?
One very small thing is, I believe, I could be wrong, $10,000 is still in the budget for participatory budgeting.
It's gone this year.
Who, what is that?
So basically, it's a way of allowing the community to get involved in allocating a small amount of money. Richmond, we were gonna start this in 2019, staffing changes fell apart, never developed. Richmond started at the same time, they just did it with $1 million. The benefit is really that the community can understand how our decision-making works. There are members in the community who've been involved with Richmond's process who want to help the city, if staff capacity is a concern, to get a really baby program off the ground with like $10,000. So if there's an openness to those members who worked on it in Richmond helping the city, and $10,000 is feasible, there are people out there who want to do it without, I'll just lay that
I
out.
think we can figure out a way to consider that and come back and take a look at
I
that.
think I would need a bigger presentation about
Mhm.
that.
I'll email you all information
Yeah.
as well, because
Sounds-
this dates back to like a saga that dates back to 2017. But,
Yeah, it
Sounds
was there,
interesting.
it was there and we weren't using it. I mean, I'll be honest and say that's the reason why it was taken, because we
Right.
just haven't been using it.
Mhm.
And I've been, as I came to you all about your Strategic Initiatives Fund, contributing to the surplus because we weren't spending it, I started saying, okay, let's pull everything.
and process-wise, one, I completely agree with being as cautious as possible with the surplus and everything else. I actually feel way more nervous than COVID in terms of the possibilities of a financial crisis and just how chaotic things could get. So 100% agree there. When will we have the discussion or have a process around these kind of big overhanging things around funding permanent year-round shelter, Cherry Avenue, and UVA's request at 10th and Wortland? Because these just seem like huge requests that are just kind of like dangling out there.
Sure. So the low barrier shelter conversation, the update there is that I have continued conversations with Salvation Army and Pacham, and we're working through the process of them producing operation plans so that there's something to be able to communicate with the neighborhood as to this facility, if it were to open, would operate in this manner. How does that sound to you? What are you concerned about? What additional supports might we need to identify to quell any fears and concern? That we are hoping to get more clarity on. I have a meeting on Monday, hoping to get more clarity on the idea that we might have some information to bring forward by June. We have a state of homelessness scheduled as a work session for you all in May. I may alter that date because of this new information that may be coming to us in June. I'm working on reorganizing the schedule that way. That would lead to a little more clarity as it relates to where are we with the shelter. Senator Deeds had another item to support Salvation Army's request for $1.5 million in the budget. The governor slashed it in half. In my recent conversation, as I mentioned before, with Senator Deeds, he was pushing it back, which means it goes back for reconsideration, and it's either to restore it to the 1.5 or it's lost, is how it works. So we risk not getting anything. But I believe he felt strongly about the item, so that's the reason why he wanted to push to get it fully funded. It turns out through the conversations that would be all for the low barrier shelter. So that would be $1.5 million to help with the retrofit of the space should it materialize. I am continuing to remind the public that no decision has been made. I keep getting messages of people saying that I've made a decision and they think it's unfair that I did, and I'm reminding them that no decision has been made. We're still trying to work through getting the clarity that they continue to request, and I'm trying to facilitate that. My intention is to bring back as much of that information as soon as I can. As it relates to the grocery store, the Fifield neighborhood has been working to receive operation plans from the two parties that they deem eligible for running a store of this kind. We internally, separately, myself and Chris Engel have worked through the idea that the city can contribute. We will bring a recommendation to you to support this initiative. We haven't fully settled on what that is. I still continue to hold out on the idea that this grocery store is going to require an operating subsidy in order for it to be successful. And for it to be successful means that it can provide the opportunities for people to reach it with the lowest incomes. Therefore, we're not turning it into a boutique grocery store at some point because it can't survive if it isn't being shopped on a regular basis. So therefore, you drive the prices up and then you start to change what you offer for sale. So I'm wanting to make sure that we are meeting the expectation that we originally set out on for this to be a grocery store for people of low means. And the goal for me would be to see that we can operate that way, and then to be able to bring to you all a recommendation that if you are going to invest in this, you're investing in it meeting the original intent. So there's a question about what that would require, and we have not heard that they have selected an operator yet, and that is probably a big contributing factor as to what that grocery store would be like.
The only comment I'd make about that is the ongoing operating costs. I'm certainly open to that discussion, but they have got to just finish the project.
Mm-hmm.
So from a construction perspective, whatever's necessary to get to a cold, dark shell, warm, dark, whatever
Mm-hmm.
they need to shell that out so that the rest of that project, I don't want that project to be held up
About that,
because of
yeah.
these ongoing conversations about to co-op or not to co-op.
Mhm.
We need the homes
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, and that is where the conversation
And
has started
the-
moving again.
And the parties, I mean, the developer who's been a great sport, to put it mildly, about this whole thing, plus PHA, they've got commitments they've got to meet,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that conversation has been moving. There was a third thing you mentioned.
Permanent support.
10th and.
10th and Wordland.
UVA's.
So for 10th and Wordland, that item is a part of our process where we, within our NOFA, we ask for submissions. We will be bringing to you the list of projects that are out there as a part of the budget cycle for FY27. That'll be coming to you in the fall. And that will be part of what we will be looking for is for you to indicate, are there projects on this list that you gravitate to in the way of wanting to support? To what degree might you want to support? Because then that informs some of our CIP conversations.
And that's applications through CAF or applications to CIP separate from CAF?
They actually have their own moment within the NOFA. So we issue, do you know when? I want to say November on the schedule. I think in November of each year, we do a request for information on development projects. So the goal is for us to capture that and then to be able to bring that into the next budget cycle's conversation so that we can give you the opportunity to decide if that's a project that you want to support. So we're now trying to steer anyone who is doing a development project that they want the city to contribute to or consider contributing to hit that mark of submitting that in November.
So we will attempt to resolve the 10th in question over the next year.
We will be bringing it back to you for you to chew on it again, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we may have to broach that subject as a part of your strategy for the bigger looming question of the relationship with the university.
And one of the other pieces that you mentioned was permanent supportive housing, which is different than low barrier shelter. So I know we had Crossings 2 planned 8 years ago,
Yeah,
and we've brought it up again every once in a while.
Well, Premier Circle replaced it, sort of.
yeah, it really did. I mean, I would say that the gap that we identified when the Crossings 2 did not materialize, Premier Circle really replaces that. I think we also have to acknowledge that we know that our rate of homelessness has increased, or at least has sustained itself over a longer period of time. So for that, a gap still exists. The question is how much of a gap. We know that there are specialty gaps that do exist, if I can use that term. Marshall reminds me that we have no family shelter. So we have individuals, head of household with children, that today there is no facility for them. So I recognize that that's part of the ongoing conversation of when I finish this, what do we go to next? So we know that we're going to have to continue to do that. But we really need all the things that we kind of have going right now to happen and then reassess and see where we are.
Thanks.
Any other comments from council? I don't see any public here. Did you have anything else, Sam?
Nope, I am done.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor, please stand up. Thank you.